Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Drexel Biddle was a master in hand-to-hand combat. He used to order his troops to surround him with bayonets before single-handedly disarming each of them without any of his own weapons. This photo of one such demonstration was taken in 1943. Tsar Bomba was the largest bomb ever set off by far. It produced a mushroom cloud 168 times taller than the Empire State Building. Its power output was 1.4% of the sun's, and it sent shockwaves that traveled around the Earth 3 times. After a battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. A former intern at NASA named Thad Roberts stole $20 million worth of moon rocks to have sex on them with his girlfriend. He was only caught when he tried to sell them online to undercover FBI agents. He served 6 years in a federal prison for the crime. This is a photo of John Lennon signing an autograph for Mark David Chapman, the man who would kill him 5 hours later. 25 years following the unsolved murder of Nicole Van Den Herk, her stepbrother falsely confessed to killing her. He did this so that her body would be exhumed for DNA testing, which led to the arrest and prosecution of her true killer. Coconut crabs have a great sense of smell and will travel in packs to find food. They'll eat virtually anything and are basically the raccoons of the Indo-Pacific Islands. A Kansas homeowner turned on his sprinklers before leaving to escape a wildfire. He returned to find his home completely intact while everything around it had burnt to the ground. In the 1950s, a family from Texas had a pet lion named Blondie. They never had a single incident with her, and she died of old age as a beloved member of the family. A Colombian woman was raised by monkeys after being kidnapped and abandoned in the jungle as a child. She spent 5 years living with a colony of capuchin monkeys before being rescued by hunters. When she was found, she didn't know how to cooperate with other humans. In 2021, escapologist Jonathan Goodwin attempted one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed for America's Got Talent Extreme, but it went catastrophically wrong. Suspended in a straitjacket between 2 swinging cars rigged to explode, the timing malfunctioned and the vehicles slammed together with him still in between before he plummeted more than 30 feet to the ground. The impact severed his spinal cord, shattered both legs and shoulder blades, destroyed a kidney, and left him permanently paralyzed. He was airlifted from the set in critical condition, underwent multiple surgeries, and spent months hospitalized before being discharged in early 2022. Now confined to a wheelchair for life, Goodwin has described the incident as a miracle of survival. The next year, Goodwin filed a lawsuit against NBC Universal and others, accusing them of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and a production that valued spectacle over human life. The filing claims the stunt was rushed, chaotic, and staffed by a team that lacked the necessary expertise, and that Goodwin will be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life because of it. These are some extinct animal species that scientists plan on bringing back. Benjamin, the last Tasmanian tiger, died in 1936 after being locked outside of its sleeping quarters and freezing to death at the Hobart Zoo. Ever since the species went extinct, an overabundance of their disease-carrying prey has run rampant because its primary predator disappeared, making the thylacine a strong candidate to become one of the first species to de-extinct through cloning. The quagga is a subspecies of the plain zebra that went extinct in 1883 due to excessive hunting. But the Quagga Project seeks to use selective breeding to bring these animals back, with the hope that their reintroduction will eradicate some of the invasive trees throughout South Africa. The dodo bird evolved without any natural predators, but humans eventually took advantage of this and killed them all for food. But in 2007, scientists came across the best preserved dodo sample ever found, which may make it possible to bring them back through the help of their closest living relative, the macabre pigeon. Gabriela Martins Santos de Moura was a 31-year-old well-being influencer from Brazil who'd spent years trying to get pregnant with her husband. In February of 2026, she went to a human reproduction clinic in Sao Paulo to undergo an assisted fertility procedure as part of that effort. But during the treatment, she suddenly suffered cardiorespiratory arrest at the clinic. She was rushed to a hospital and placed on life support in intensive care. Her doctors fought to stabilize her for 8 days before confirming brain death. The exact complication that caused the cardiac arrest has not been publicly disclosed. The tragedy came just 1 day after she and her husband had celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary. After her death, her family announced they would donate her organ to give others the chance to live. In the summer of 1983, 53-year-old Silvano from a noble Venetian family died in Bologna, Italy, after developing one of the strangest and most terrifying inherited diseases ever documented, fatal familial insomnia. The illness began in middle age and slowly destroyed the part of his brain responsible for sleep, until Silvano gradually lost the ability to sleep at all. Days turned into weeks without rest as his body deteriorated, his brain slipping into delusions and hallucinations as doctors watched helplessly. The disease literally ate away at his brain tissue, and within a few months, the total absence of sleep led to organ failure and death. In 2001, an 8-year-old boy named Jesse Arbogast was attacked by a 7-foot bull shark while he was standing in knee-deep water near Pensacola, Florida. The shark had bitten off one of Jesse's arms and part of his thigh before his uncle pulled it away and wrestled it to shore. After a park ranger shot the shark in the head, Jesse's uncle retrieved the severed arm, put it on ice, and drove it to the hospital where it was successfully reattached. Morticians often use these spiky contacts to keep the eyes of the dead closed during funeral viewings. King Tut was a product of incest as his parents were brother and sister. He had a club foot, a severe overbite, womanly hips, and enlarged breasts. Most experts agree that he probably died as a result of these deformities. The human head can remain conscious and aware for up to 20 seconds after being decapitated. A student was once taking an exam and couldn't handle the stress and anxiety anymore, so he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the desk, forcing the pencils through his brain. He died instantly, and all the other students got automatic A's. One of the actors in The Exorcist went on to become an actual serial killer. Paul Bateson, who plays a nurse in the film, eventually confessed to the killing and dismembering of 6 gay men in the late 1970s. He was released from prison in 2004. In 2014, a family bought a $1.3 million dream home in Westfield, New Jersey, but they never moved in because they immediately started receiving sinister, threatening letters from someone called The Watcher. He would write messages like, "All of the windows and doors allow me to watch and track you as you move through the house. Have you found what is in the walls yet? I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me." The family has been unsuccessful in their attempts to resell the property. In 1987, North Korean spy Kim Hyun-hui blew up Korean Air Flight 858, killing all 115 passengers on board. After failing to take a cyanide pill afterwards, she told interrogators it was a direct order from Kim Jong-il that she had no way of backing out of without being killed. The woman was originally sentenced to death, but later pardoned by the South Korean president, who said she was merely a brainwashed victim of the real culprit, the North Korean government. Hyun-hui ended up marrying one of her interrogators, and they live happily ever after with their 2 children. While recording the audio version of his book Charlotte's Web, it took author E.B. White 17 takes to read the death scene of Charlotte. He's said to have walked outside for a breather, come back in, and started crying again every time he got to that moment. In 1184, the King of Germany was conducting a meeting with his noblemen on the 2nd floor of a church when the floor suddenly collapsed. The king, whose seat was on a separate section that didn't collapse, watched in horror as 60 of his noblemen drowned in the cesspit located below that hadn't been emptied out in years. This photo is the definition of fear. A young woman in LA was evading a home intruder by hiding on her roof, and she managed to grab her phone and call 911. She said that her greatest fear was that the intruder would try to hide where she was hiding. Authorities soon had the area surrounded, and the man is now in prison. The top map shows mysterious cases of people vanishing without a trace. The bottom map shows America's largest cave systems. Juan Catalan spent nearly 6 months in jail for the murder of a teenage girl. He was the prime suspect only until his lawyer found some unused footage from HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm. The footage proved that Catalan had been at a Dodgers game with his 6-year-old daughter at the time of the murder. Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny and many more, started smoking at age 9 and changed his name from Blank to Blanc after a teacher told him he would amount to nothing just like his name. He was once involved in a head-on collision at a Sunset Boulevard intersection known as Dead Man's Curve, a spot notorious for accidents. The crash resulted in a 2-week coma, and he was completely non-responsive until a doctor decided to ask him, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?" Blanc then responded to him in the voice of Bugs, and thus woke up from the coma. This also happened in the middle of production for season 1 of The Flintstones, for which Blanc was the voice of Barney Rubble. So during his stay in the hospital, the other actors would crowd around his hospital bed to record their lines. Around 40 episodes of The Flintstones were recorded in this manner. After the legendary voice actor died from heart disease and emphysema in 1989, his tombstone read, "That's all, folks." A shocking medical scandal is unfolding in Austria, where a neurosurgeon is facing criminal charges for allegedly letting her 12-year-old daughter drill a hole into a patient's skull during emergency brain surgery. The unconscious patient had suffered traumatic head injuries and needed a burr hole to relieve pressure, yet prosecutors say the surgeon handed the drill to her daughter and let her perform the procedure herself, despite the child having zero medical training. The girl never should have been inside the operating room in the first place, as strict hospital protocol forbids minors or unauthorized personnel from being present during sterile surgeries, let alone touching the equipment, let alone drilling into patients' skulls. The patient was never informed a child would be involved, and only discovered the truth months later after an anonymous tip led to an investigation. The hospital immediately fired the surgeons involved, and the lead doctor is now on trial for causing bodily harm and abusing her position. Although the patient survived, he reportedly still suffers long-term effects, and the court called the doctor's decision a catastrophic breach of trust and professionalism. In Ottawa, Canada in 2012, staff at the Conservative Party of Canada's headquarters called police after discovering a package emitting a foul odor. Party official Jenny Byrne had unknowingly handled the contents, which investigators later determined was a decomposing human foot belonging to Jun Lin, a Chinese international student who'd been murdered and dismembered by Luca Minata in Montreal, Quebec. Several other body parts were mailed to political offices and schools across Canada before Minata fled the country. He was later captured in Berlin, Germany, convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. In South River, New Jersey, 49-year-old Anna Amato was arrested after allegedly posing as a dentist and performing dental work without a license. She reportedly advertised cheap procedures in WhatsApp group chats and agreed to perform a $1,000 root canal on a patient. After injecting anesthetic and drilling into the man's tooth, she suddenly stopped mid-procedure and told him to come back later. Days afterwards, she admitted she couldn't finish the root canal and suggested he see a real dentist instead. The patient later went to police with gauze in his mouth and still bleeding in excruciating pain, after she allegedly refused to refund his $300 deposit. Investigators soon discovered Amato was never licensed to practice dentistry, and she was arrested in February of 2026 on charges including aggravated assault and impersonating a dentist. This was the moment a man attempted to rob a small loans office in Kazakhstan, smashing through thin laminated safety glass at the receptionist's window. He then quickly climbed inside, grabbed the female clerk, and threatened her with a knife to force her cooperation. He stole about $340 before fleeing, but police arrested him later that same day. Authorities confirmed he was eventually prosecuted and ultimately sentenced to 7 years in prison for the robbery, while the clerk managed to escape unharmed. This person looked over the balcony of their high-rise apartment building to realize they owned a cat, not a pussy. Here's a clip of a man trapped inside a grain silo with thousands of pounds of grain pressing in from every direction. What makes this situation so horrifying is that grain doesn't behave like a solid. Once it starts moving, it flows like liquid, pulling a person under like quicksand. Within seconds, someone can be buried up to their chest, and struggling only makes it worse. By this point, self-rescue is nearly impossible. The pressure restricts breathing, and panic speeds up suffocation. The only real chance of survival is to stop moving and hold a small pocket of air around your face, keeping your head above the grain until rescuers arrive. Accordingly, dozens of farmers die every year in this exact way due to grain entrapment. Hugh Jackman has had multiple basal cell carcinomas removed, a type of skin cancer caused by long-term UV exposure. These cancers often start off as small, easy-to-miss spots, but can slowly grow deeper into surrounding tissue if left untreated, in some cases eroding skin and underlying structures. His repeated diagnoses suggest damage that continues to surface years after the initial exposure. While rarely fatal, basal cell carcinoma can quietly develop, recur, and progressively invade tissue, making it more serious than most people realize. He's since used his experience to warn others about the dangers of UV exposure, regularly urging people to wear sunscreen and get their skin checked. In 2004 in South Africa, trophy hunter Ryan Naud, who ran Pro Hunt Africa and was known for killing endangered animals, was found dead beside his broken-down truck on a remote road. His vehicle had overheated, leaving him stranded and alone. When police arrived, he was lying next to the truck with multiple gunshot wounds, suggesting he had been approached at close range and executed. There were no clear signs of a struggle, and his belongings were left behind, making the motive unclear. Many speculate the killing was retaliatory due to his work killing protected wildlife, but no suspects were ever identified, and the case remains unsolved. Donda West was turned down by many plastic surgeons before she found one who would perform on her despite her heart condition. Sadly, as a result of the surgery, she died the next day, and Kanye has blamed himself ever since. The last French soldier to die in World War I was killed just 15 minutes before the ceasefire. He was trying to deliver a message to his unit that soup would be served for lunch. A man from Turkey locked his head in a cage for weeks in an attempt to quit smoking. His wife held on to the key and only opened it for meals and sleep. In 2014, General Motors recalled 2.5 million cars for faulty ignitions. The cars would literally shut off while being driven, so drivers would lose control of their brakes and airbags wouldn't deploy. GM knew about the problem since 2005, but never fixed it because it would be too expensive. And as a result, over 100 people died. 72-year-old David Lee Niles was reported missing in 2006. 5 years later, his family held a funeral for their lost loved one despite not finding his body yet. But eventually, Google Earth users found this car trapped in a pond near David's home. When they went to search it, David's skeletal remains were found in the car. A doctor chronicled the progression of Alzheimer's disease in one of his patients by collecting her signatures on medical forms over the years. In 2011, a 49-year-old Russian woman had a heart attack and was presumed dead. A few days later, she woke up at her own wake and was so shocked that she screamed and had another heart attack, this time dying for real. Real estate agent Todd Kohlhepp became known as the Amazon Review Killer after investigators uncovered sarcastic product reviews he had posted that referenced his real crimes. For years, he joked about using knives, chains, and shovels while remaining unidentified. In 2016, police traced the disappearance of Kayla Brown to his rural South Carolina property, where she was found alive, chained inside a shipping container after Kohlhepp had already murdered her boyfriend. A search of the land revealed multiple buried bodies, and Kohlhepp later confessed to killing 7 people between 2003 and 2016, including 4 victims in a Long Cold motorcycle shop massacre. Kim Stanger is a criminal law researcher in Ohio who lives with an extremely rare neurological condition that leaves her with no sense of touch, pain, or temperature. Her peripheral nerves don't transmit any sensory signals, meaning she cannot feel injuries, burns, or pressure on her body. Doctors have described her as the only living person documented with a complete loss of somatosensation at this level. As a result, Stanger must visually monitor her body at all times to avoid unknowingly injuring herself, as even severe wounds or extreme temperatures provide no physical warning. In 1985, a 13-year-old Colombian girl was trapped up to her waist in volcanic mud flow. She was mostly alert and was interviewed, but rescuers couldn't find a way to save her. Knowing she would certainly die, volunteers did their best to comfort her. She died after 60 hours, and her image became iconic. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. The loudest sound ever heard on Earth was the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883. The explosion had a nuclear yield 13,000 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It ruptured the eardrums of sailors 40 miles away, and people as far as 3,000 miles away reported hearing it as a distant roar of heavy guns. To put that into perspective, it would be like sitting in Boston and hearing a sound that came all the way from Ireland. It was one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in history, since at least 35,000 people died and the global temperature was lowered by 2 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 years. This is what it looks like when a shepherd is displaced by war. The footage shows hundreds of goats and sheep moving through the streets of Beirut behind a man who had fled Israeli strikes in Lebanon near Naqoura. He reportedly walked for days to reach the city and brought his entire herd with him instead of leaving them behind. In rural Lebanon, a single goat or sheep can be worth up to $300, meaning a herd this size can represent tens of thousands of dollars in a person's entire livelihood. Here's a ridiculously amazing video of lightning striking a firework. Commenters across the internet said it was God's way of telling the fireworkers to keep the noise down. This is what it looks like to win at pinball. Here's a clip of a Picasso bug, Africa's living masterpiece. Native to sub-Saharan Africa, this tiny insect is only about a centimeter long, but its shell is covered in striking geometric patterns of red, blue, yellow, and black. Those vivid colors do serve a purpose, warning predators that it tastes terrible. This is why you should never touch a tree branch in Australia. The wraparound spider can flatten and wrap its body around tree limbs for perfect camouflage. The same whale was found and photographed after 35 years off the western coast of Mexico. The Atlas moth scares off predators by imitating the appearance and behavior of a snake. The moth will often fall to the ground when threatened and flap around to look like a writhing cobra. I'm not sure, I don't remember where we were the last time we left off, so we're gonna say part 1. Before he became Wolverine, Hugh Jackman was a struggling actor working kids' birthday parties as a clown named Coco, earning about $50 a gig. He's admitted he didn't even know any real magic tricks and was once told by a 6-year-old, "You're terrible." Jackman has said those early performances forced him to learn how to command a room, handle rejection, and keep entertaining no matter what, skills that would later define his stage and film career. In 1946, French designer Louis Réard named the bikini after Bikini Atoll, where the United States had just conducted atomic bomb tests. He chose the name deliberately, claiming the revealing swimsuit would have an explosive cultural impact similar to the atomic blast that had just shocked the world. Sylvester Stallone wrote the script for Rocky in about 3 days after watching underdog boxer Chuck Wepner go the distance with Muhammad Ali. At the time, Stallone was struggling financially and reportedly had less than $200 in his bank account. Studios offered to buy the script but wanted a major star in the lead role. Stallone refused any offers unless he could play Rocky himself. He took a significantly smaller payday to secure the role, a gamble that paid off when Rocky won the Academy Award for Best Picture and launched his career. In 2018, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin called 911 to report that she and her 12 siblings were being abused by their parents. This is sadly rather common, but what police discovered in the Turpin household was far more horrific than anything they'd seen before. The entire house reeked of human excrement, decaying garbage, and dead pets that were scattered throughout the home. Many of the 12 children had been tied to their beds and were covered in bruises and dirt. It was clear that David and Louise Turpin had been torturing their children for years, allowing them to eat just once per day and shower just once per year. They would reportedly often leave food on the table and force their children to stare at it before throwing it away in the trash. This resulted in extreme malnourishment, as their oldest son was 29 years old but weighed just 82 pounds at the time of their rescue. The kids were so clearly abused that a few doctors broke down in tears upon seeing them for the first time. The Turpin parents were handed 12 counts of torture among numerous other charges and were effectively sentenced to life in prison. On a cold winter night in 1977, 48-year-old Teresita Basso was found brutally murdered in her Chicago apartment. Her body had been left naked under a burning mattress with a knife still embedded in her chest. The case quickly went cold with no suspects and no apparent motive, until months later when police received a chilling phone call. A local man claimed that his wife, who had worked with Teresita, began channeling messages from Teresita's ghost during trance-like states. During these eerie episodes, the woman would apparently speak in Teresita's voice, identifying her killer as a man named Alan Showery. Even more disturbingly, the alleged spirit named stolen items that were taken from her apartment, including specific pieces of jewelry that Showery had stolen from her. As absurd as it sounded, police followed these clues, and shockingly, they all checked out. Showery was arrested and eventually confessed, making this one of the most bizarre criminal cases in modern history. A rare golden possum was found in Australia and named Pikachu for obvious reasons. Its golden yellow fur is the result of a genetic mutation that affects the possum's melanin production. This picture shows invasive coyotes meeting reintroduced wolves for the first time at Yellowstone National Park. In 1997, tree hugger Julia Hill started living in a 1,500-year-old California redwood tree to prevent loggers from cutting it down. She ended up staying there for a total of 738 days, and the tree still stands to this day. MF Doom, the masked supervillain of hip-hop, died in a way just as mysterious as the persona he created. On Halloween Day in 2020, he passed away at 49, but his death was kept completely secret for 62 days. For 2 months, fans continued listening to his music and waiting for new projects, unaware that he was already gone. Then on New Year's Eve, his wife quietly announced his passing, but gave no cause of death or any further details. To this day, the circumstances remain undisclosed, sparking endless speculation. It felt strangely fitting. Doom built his entire identity around mystery and anonymity, sometimes even sending imposters to perform in his place. In the end, he died on Halloween, vanished in silence, and left behind one final mystery. In 1929, 6-year-old Carl Newton Mahan became the youngest person in American history to be charged with murder, then sat in a courtroom playing with a doll. The Kentucky boy had gotten into a fight with an 8-year-old named Cecil Van Hoos over a piece of scrap metal. Cecil reportedly slapped him, so Carl ran home, grabbed his father's shotgun, and blasted the older boy, killing him instantly. Because of the shocking nature of the crime, Carl was actually put on trial for murder, sitting in the courtroom so young that they had to give him toys to keep him calm. The jury found him guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 15 years in reform school, but the conviction was quickly overturned due to public outrage. Brett Favre built his reputation on never leaving the field, even when his brain was clearly injured. Over 2 decades, he absorbed countless hits, and later admitted he may have suffered thousands of concussions that were never diagnosed. He said there are entire games he doesn't even remember playing, including big wins and touchdown passes made when he was confused, dizzy, and disoriented. At the time, returning to play after a head injury was often praised as toughness rather than treated as a medical emergency. Favre described playing through ringing ears, flashing lights, and mental fog, classic concussion symptoms that were ignored during an era with virtually no concussion protocols. Painkillers masked the damage, allowing him to stay on the field while repeated hits accumulated. In retirement in 2024, Favre revealed he now has Parkinson's disease, a condition researchers link to long-term head trauma. His famous Iron Man streak of 297 consecutive games is now viewed by neurologists as a warning, showing how endurance in football can come at the cost of permanent brain damage. A flight attendant named Sheila Frederick noticed a terrified girl who was accompanied by an older man on a flight. Sheila discreetly told the girl to go to the bathroom, where she left a note asking if she was okay. The girl went to the bathroom and wrote, "I need help" on the note. The police were waiting when the plane landed, and the girl was saved from a human trafficker. This is a photo of a police canine being saluted by officers before entering the vet to be put down. This mother horse lost her baby while in labor. 2 days later, she was given a foal who had lost her mother, and this was the photo taken after they were introduced. A 67-year-old named Dorothy Fletcher once had a heart attack while on a flight. When a stewardess asked if there was a doctor on the flight, 15 people stood up. They happened to be on their way to a cardiology conference, and the woman was saved. That was the voice of police officer Michael Russ calling 911 in James City County, Virginia in 2023, telling dispatch he had just shot his own sergeant after claiming he was about to be sexually assaulted. According to Russ, Gibson had made prior unwanted advances, and that night the situation escalated when Gibson allegedly tried to force himself onto him. During the struggle, Rusk said he repeatedly told them to stop before pulling out his gun and firing several shots. Michael's father, Jason Rusk, said he told him about unwanted attention he received from his superior officer leading up to the shooting, and that he'd reported it to others in the department several times.
There was a year's worth of grooming that had taken place. Extremely inappropriate touching, stalking, the grooming. The previous to the incident, assaults.
Here's a video showing the officers at the bar prior to the shooting, where Gibson gets out of his seat to sit next to Rusk before reaching over to hold his hand, which Rusk appears to turn down. Then about an hour before the shooting, the two can be seen outside before apparently leaving together. Gibson puts his hand on Rusk's shoulder, and Rusk responds by pushing him away and pointing a finger in his face. It's unclear what happened next, but after the shooting, Rusk made this claim to the dispatcher. Gibson was hit several times and survived after emergency surgery. When officers arrived, Rusk was still on the scene and was immediately taken into custody. Investigators said the physical evidence didn't fully support a clear-cut self-defense claim, leading to Rusk being charged with several felonies. In 2024, Rusk took a plea deal, avoiding active prison time, but losing his career in law enforcement and his right to carry a firearm. The largest organism in the world is a giant mushroom in Oregon's Malheur National Forest. Its root system is the size of 1,500 football fields, and it might be as much as 8,000 years old. The Costa Rican glass frog has transparent skin, allowing you to see its organ structure. A bite from the Brazilian wandering spider can cause men to have an erection lasting longer than 4 hours. There have been no recorded fatal attacks of wild orcas on humans. In 2005, a 12-year-old boy in Alaska was bumped by a killer whale while splashing in 4 feet of water. The boy was likely mistaken for a seal, and the bump was an aborted attack once the whale realized its mistake. All 4 times that humans have been killed by orcas were in captivity. This is the last known photo of Freddie Mercury before his death in 1991. In order to avoid the attention, Freddie denied rumors about having AIDS until the day before he died. During the Middle Ages, it was believed that sperm produced from the left testicle resulted in having a girl. So to ensure having a son, men would often have their left testicle removed in a painful surgery. In the 1960s, Canadian woodsman Francis Wharton shot a deer and made dentures out of its teeth. He then proceeded to eat the deer with the deer's own teeth. A cat named Oscar correctly predicted the deaths of over 50 patients at a nursing home in Rhode Island. Soon after he arrived at the home, staff noticed that Oscar chose to nap next to patients who would die a few hours later. Nurses would sometimes even place Oscar next to patients they thought would die, but he would move to other patients and be correct every time. In 2013, a Nigerian chef survived in a sunken ship for nearly 3 days. It was 270 feet deep in pitch black water, and he said the only thing he could hear was the sound of fish eating the corpses of his shipmates. It is estimated that up to 2 million German women were raped by Soviet soldiers following World War II. In an attempt to reduce the number of people committing suicide by jumping off of South Korea's Mapo Bridge, the bridge was renamed the Bridge of Life and was decorated with positive messages. The next year, suicides increased by 600%. In 1995, 15-year-old Elise Poller was lured to a remote eucalyptus grove in California by 3 teenage boys she knew from school. But what began as a planned meetup quickly turned into a brutal attack. Elise was stabbed multiple times and strangled, and her body was hidden in dense brush where it remained undiscovered for months. The case finally unraveled when one of the teens confessed to his youth pastor, who contacted authorities and led investigators to her remains. During questioning, the boys told police the killing was part of a satanic ritual that would help their struggling death metal band gain success. They specifically claimed they needed to sacrifice a virgin, a detail that shocked the community and drew national attention to the case. All 3 were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to decades in prison. In recent years, 2 of the men have been granted parole while the other remains in prison, a decision that's reopened old wounds in the community nearly 3 decades later. Here's some extremely rare footage of a pilot flying straight into the eye of Hurricane Melissa. The eye forms when a hurricane becomes powerful enough to organize itself. A calm circular zone in the center where air actually sinks instead of rising. While the surrounding eye wall is a violent ring of wind and rain, the eye can be eerily clear and still, sometimes even letting sunlight through. This is the only known footage of the extremely rare box jellyfish known as Chirodectes. Captured off the coast of Papua New Guinea, this was only the 2nd ever sighting of the species in recorded history. Draining glyphosate into a container looks like a glitch in the Matrix, but it's actually a laminar flow effect, where the liquid moves so smoothly it appears frozen in place. Here's some extremely rare footage of a snow leopard caught on a trail cam in the wild. These elusive predators are known as the ghosts of the mountains for a reason. So few humans ever catch a glimpse of them that even wildlife experts can spend years tracking one without success. They live high in the remote peaks of Central Asia, blending in perfectly with the jagged, icy terrain, where temperatures often plummet below zero and oxygen is scarce. Their thick spotted coats act as camouflage against the rocks and snow, making them nearly invisible even when they're just a few feet away. While it may look edited, this is just a photo of the giant African land snail. While often considered to be an invasive species, they can be kept as pets. They can live for several years and can grow up to 8 inches long. Photographer Herbert van der Beek captured this extremely rare moment of a jaguar diving underwater to catch its prey. Leoconcha hieroglyphica is a mollusk that received its name because it looks like it's covered in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Only discovered in 1976, the megamouth shark is an extremely rare species of deep water shark. Less than 100 of them have ever been seen or caught. Although they look nothing alike, the stunningly iridescent Nicobar pigeon is the closest living relative to the extinct dodo bird. In 1955, 24-year-old actor James Dean died in a car crash while driving his Porsche 550 Spider, which he nicknamed Little Bastard. After the accident, the car was towed to a garage in Los Angeles, and while it was being repaired, it fell off its jack and crushed a mechanic's legs. The engine and transmission were later sold to 2 professional racers, both of whom later crashed their vehicles during the same race and were seriously injured. The car's tires were also sold, and the new owner was eventually killed in yet another car crash. Over time, the stories of deaths and injuries associated with the car led to rumors of a curse. Some believed that the car was haunted and that anyone who came into contact with it would suffer misfortune. But in 1960, the car disappeared while being transported from Miami to Los Angeles. The car has never been found, and its whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. Between 2016 and 2022 in Germany, reality TV star Theresia Fischer underwent 2 leg-lengthening surgeries that increased her height by about 14 centimeters or 5.5 inches. The procedure required doctors to break her leg bones and implant adjustable metal rods, slowly extending them over time as new bone formed. Although the surgeries achieved the desired height, Fisher later said the process left her in constant pain during the recovery and emotionally scarred, revealing she felt pressured into it by a former partner and ultimately came to regret altering her body so drastically. Between 1975 and 1979, Cambodia was controlled by the Khmer Rouge regime, a brutal communist regime that targeted and executed educated people, including doctors, teachers, and anyone seen as intellectual. During this time, OB/GYN Dr. Hein S. Nagor was forced into labor camps and survived by hiding his medical background, knowing it would mean certain death if discovered. When his wife went into labor and required a life-saving C-section, Nagor faced an impossible choice: perform the procedure and expose himself, or stay silent and let his wife die. He chose not to risk it, and both his wife and their unborn child died during childbirth. This was the terrifying moment a textile factory worker suddenly got pulled into a rope winding machine. As the machine spun, the rope wrapped around his leg and dragged him toward the rollers in a split second. Luckily, the coworker by his side quickly hit the emergency stop just in time, likely saving him from a horrific death. Someone in Birmingham, Alabama was suddenly woken up by this life-threatening scene: a massive branch that crashed through the roof during intense storms. In something straight out of Final Destination, they were only feet away from being impaled in their sleep. This was the intense moment a foundry worker unknowingly dumped wet scrap metal into a furnace using a forklift. When water touches molten metal, it instantly flashes into steam and expands violently, triggering a powerful steam explosion. Immediately after the scrap is dumped, the furnace erupts in a sudden burst of steam and molten metal. The driver's forklift is briefly surrounded by the splash, but he miraculously manages to reverse away and somehow avoids any serious injuries. There's typically an IQ minimum of 80 points to serve in the US military. But to meet the manpower requirements of the Vietnam War, the US Army loosened up on this policy and began recruiting soldiers with mental disabilities. These men were known as McNamara's morons and died at 5 times the rate of other Americans in the war. This is also what the character Forrest Gump was based on. A suicide bomber in Afghanistan was thwarted by a stray dog which barked and snarled at the man, causing him to prematurely detonate at the entrance. The dog was then flown to the United States and appeared on Oprah before being adopted. But tragically, she ran away from home and was captured by an animal shelter which ended up euthanizing her by mistake. In 1943, Polish ballerina Francesca Mann arrived at Auschwitz. When ordered to take off her clothes, she did so provocatively to divert the attention of the guards. While the roll call officer was distracted, she grabbed his gun and shot the man in the head. She then managed to wound another guard before other prisoners joined her rebellion until they were all shot dead. Baby Molly Gibson was born in October of 2020, but she was technically 27 years old at her birth, just 2 years younger than her mom. Her embryo was donated in 1992 and stored in a liquid nitrogen tank until she was adopted in 2020 for in vitro fertilization. In 1994, a Russian pilot allowed his 16-year-old son to sit at the controls of the plane. But his son accidentally disabled the autopilot, crashing the plane and killing all 75 passengers on board. From the time of its discovery to its demotion, Pluto didn't even make one full revolution around the sun. If you hit someone with your car in China, you must pay for their medical care for the rest of their life. But if you kill someone with your car, you only have to pay a one-time fee. For this reason, it's common for people to go back and kill someone they accidentally hit. Something must have gone extremely wrong with the DNA of this octopus that was found with 85 tentacles in Japan. Snowflake was an albino gorilla that used to live at Barcelona Zoo in Spain. Sadly, he was euthanized in 2003 after being diagnosed with a rare form of skin cancer, likely as a result of his condition. He was the world's only known albino gorilla. Ulnar dymelia, aka mirror hand, is an extremely rare developmental condition of the hand. It is characterized by the absence of the radius, duplication of the ulna, and symmetrical polydactyly, aka 7 or 8 fingers and no thumb. Less than 75 confirmed cases have been reported in medical literature to date. Morbid Facts, Part 46. In 1994, Mauro Prosperi was competing in a 145-mile endurance event through the Sahara Desert. During the race, a sandstorm disoriented Prosperi, causing him to run nearly 200 miles in the wrong direction. He soon found himself completely stranded in the middle of the desert without any resources. After a few days of suffering, he decided to slit his own wrists, attempting to die a less painful death. But he was so dehydrated that his thick blood clotted up the wounds and he woke up the next day. 9 days later, he was rescued in a completely different country after losing 40 pounds of body weight. He survived off of insects, cactuses, his own urine, bats, snakes, and wet wipes. In 2015, a man dressed as Darth Vader walked into a Swedish high school carrying a sword. Believing it to be some kind of joke, a number of students posed with him for pictures. But after the cameras were put away, he pulled out his sword and suddenly went on a rampage, killing 2 students and injuring several more. David Parker Ray, aka the Toy Box Killer, abducted his victims before drugging them. When they woke up, they replayed a recording in which he would describe the torture that they'd experience over the next 30 days. He is believed to have tortured and killed more than 50 women in his soundproof trailer. In June of 2023, in the North Atlantic Ocean near the Titanic wreck site, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Sulman were among those killed when the Titan submersible suddenly imploded. Nearly 9 months later, after recovery efforts at extreme depths, small amounts of human remains were returned to the family. Identified through DNA testing, the material was described by Shahzada's wife as the slush that was left delivered in 2 small shoeboxes. Due to the conditions of the implosion and the environment, the remains were limited and heavily fragmented, with some of the recovered material being mixed together, meaning it could not be definitively attributed to one specific individual. In Rochester, New York in 2022, a woman installed a hidden trail cam at her mother's grave after noticing it kept being disturbed. The footage soon captured her father, the woman's ex-husband, returning to the cemetery and urinating directly on the grave multiple times per week. The behavior had been going on for at least several months, and likely closer to a year or more before it was caught on camera. In multiple clips, his partner could be seen waiting nearby in a car while he carried out the act. Police were contacted, but the case fell into a gray area legally, with any charges depending on local cemetery regulation. The situation drew attention for the sustained, deliberate nature of the acts, targeting the grave long after the relationship had ended. Here's a police sketch that was released during the investigation into the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann, a case that remains unsolved nearly 2 decades later. In 2007, Madeline vanished from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents were dining nearby. She'd been left asleep with her younger siblings, and when her mother went to check on the children later that night, Madeline's bed was empty and the bedroom window was open. As the investigation dragged on, police issued multiple suspect sketches based on eyewitness accounts, including one female person of interest that later drew widespread attention due to its striking resemblance to Ghislaine Maxwell, the British former socialite who was convicted in 2021 of trafficking girls for Jeffrey Epstein. Despite one of the largest missing child investigations in European history, no definitive trace of Madeline has ever been found, as her fate remains unknown. Dan Burroughs was a high-ranking white supremacist in the 1960s, serving as the third highest member of the American Nazi Party and a Grand Dragon of the New York KKK. But in 1965, the New York Times revealed that Burroughs was actually Jewish, raised in a Jewish family, attended Hebrew school, and even had a bar mitzvah. Hours after the article was published, Burroughs took his own life, and the organizations he led immediately disavowed him as the revelation became public. In 2016, Star Trek actor Anton Yelkin died in a freak accident at the young age of 27. After pulling into his driveway in his Jeep Grand Cherokee, Yelkin went to check his locked gate for mail when the car suddenly rolled back down the driveway and pinned him against a pillar connected to the gate. It's unknown how long it took for the actor to pass, but he was found dead by friends hours after he failed to arrive at rehearsal, and the official cause of death was blunt traumatic asphyxia. Yelkin's particular car model had a known design flaw that confused drivers about whether it was properly in park, and was later recalled due to faulty gear shifters. If you think you have high cholesterol, this guy will make you feel a lot better, or should I say, a lot butter. A Florida man in his 40s followed an extreme carnivore diet for 8 months, consuming nothing but beef, butter, and cheese. He often ate entire sticks of butter and several pounds of cheese each day, causing his total cholesterol to skyrocket to over 1,000 milligrams per deciliter, while anything over 200 is considered high. As a result, he developed painless yellow cholesterol nodules on his palms, elbows, and the soles of his feet. Despite this, the patient said he felt great following the diet, and was able to lose weight while significantly improving his energy levels and mental clarity. Well, it turns out the Duke grape scandal was a confirmed massive lie. In 2006, a stripper named Crystal Mangum was hired to perform at a party hosted by members of the Duke University men's lacrosse team. After the party, Crystal claimed that 3 players on the team dragged her into the bathroom before beating, choking, and graping her. The DA who was assigned to the case then conspired with the DNA lab director to withhold crucial evidence that would have easily cleared the players of the accusations. Instead, they were charged with rape, and a public uproar led to the team's entire lacrosse season being canceled, while the coach of 16 years was forced to resign. But the players were exonerated the next year after it was revealed that Crystal was actually just a crazy bitch. A few years later, she was found guilty of second-degree murder after repeatedly stabbing her boyfriend and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Just recently on a podcast, the still-in-prison former stripper admitted that she made up the entire grape case and has asked the Duke players for forgiveness. William Hitler despised his Uncle Adolf and fled from Germany to fight for the US during World War II. William's sons also agreed to never have children in order to kill off Hitler's bloodline. During World War II, Michelangelo's statue of David was encased in bricks to prevent damage from bombs. On Christmas in 1914 during World War I, the British and Germans laid down their weapons. They crossed over no man's land and joined each other to celebrate the holiday. They exchanged food, played games, and even attended burials for each side. It was seen as a symbolic moment during the brutal war. Elizabeth Holmes founded the company Theranos in 2003, claiming her device could run hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood. At its peak, the company was valued at $9 billion, but it was all a lie. The technology never worked, test results endangered patients, and Holmes was convicted of fraud in one of the biggest corporate scandals of all time. In 2023, she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. In 2016 in China, a rideshare scam emerged where drivers deliberately used unsettling profile photos and eerie-looking identities to make passengers uneasy before pickup, hoping they'd cancel the ride. The moment a rider backed out, the driver could collect a cancellation fee without ever showing up, turning their fear into a source of profit. In 2001, a Hooters waitress named Jody Berry won a company contest promising a new Toyota, but when she was blindfolded to receive her prize, her manager handed her a Toyota doll instead. Berry sued for fraud and won, walking away with a real Toyota instead of the Jedi Master. In the 1990s in Nigeria, conman Emmanuel Nuud scammed a Brazilian bank out of $242 million by selling them a completely fake airport project. Posing as a top official, he used forged documents and fake calls to convince executives the deal was real. The fraud ran for years before finally being exposed, and while Nuud was sentenced to prison, much of the money was never recovered. In the 1990s in California, con artist Steve Comazar sold a solar-powered clothes dryer for $49.95 through magazine ads. Customers who ordered it received nothing more than a basic clothesline, realizing too late the product was technically truthful but deliberately misleading. In 2021 in Ohio, a supposed high school football team called Bishop's Sycamore played on ESPN against a top program and was blown out 58-0, raising immediate questions about who the hell they were. It was later revealed the school barely existed, many players were adults, and some even had criminal records. The program itself didn't even have a real campus. After the exposure, the head coach faced legal issues, the program completely collapsed, and the scandal sparked national outrage over how it was possible for this to even happen. In 2001 in the UK, Charles Ingram shocked viewers by winning £1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire despite struggling early on in the game. As the stakes rose, he suddenly began answering difficult questions with confidence, choosing answers that stunned both the audience and the host. Days later, producers reviewed the tapes and discovered his wife and an accomplice had been coughing to signal the correct answers. The prize was revoked, and all three were convicted of fraud. In 2015, Denise Huskins was kidnapped from her boyfriend's California home by a masked intruder before being held for ransom. She was taken to a remote location where she was blindfolded, drugged, and raped multiple times over the next 2 days. When Denise was suddenly released, police accused her of faking the entire story like a scene straight out of Gone Girl. They mocked her during press conferences and labeled her as mentally unstable, until evidence finally surfaced proving that everything she'd said was true. Her kidnapper turned out to be a former Harvard-educated lawyer who had a history of stalking couples. This still frame is from the Collateral Murder video released by WikiLeaks, captured moments before U.S. Apache helicopter pilots opened fire on local civilians and journalists in Baghdad 2007. The footage, which includes audio of the pilots making casual jokes during the attack, was leaked by whistleblower Chelsea Manning, who was subsequently sentenced to 35 years in prison, though the sentence was later commuted. No charges were ever filed against the military personnel involved in the incident.